Thanks, Rosemary. Well, last night, I was watching the Habs make history. Bleu, blanc, rouge. But, you know, in the afternoon, I was much less excited because I was subjected to yet another spectacle of the Ramelina farce. So, you know, his ex-partner, Raheem Jaffer's ex-partners before committee, talking about all kinds of stuff. You know, Jamie, what did we learn this time around?
What we learned was last week when you said that the Pat Martin put the WTF in the NDP, you were 100% right. We watched that yesterday. There is no level that guy won't stoop to get on the national news every evening. You know, his sanctimonious questioning, I think, does dishonor to all parliamentarians and all politicians. The thing I was going to say was a gong show. It redefines gong show. It was so horrifying. But the guy said a few interesting things. One, he said Raheem didn't open the Prime Minister's office. Those were his words, hyperbole, a bit too much. Two, that Raheem didn't have influence over policymakers. And three, that those busty hookers everyone likes talking about, not so much. And the cocaine, that's made up too. Look, at the end of the day, I think there's enough of this. This belongs on Gawker, TMZ. We got to stop talking about it.
You and I both work in the public affairs business. We give people advice on how to communicate their issues and their policies. I have a rule of thumb when it comes to clients. I like to say this to them. I say, if you find yourself on national television in front of parliamentarians saying the following words, my girlfriend is not busty, neither is she a hooker, then you're probably deep into the ditch. And, you know, yesterday was just, it was, as you say, I mean, it was just more spectacle. You know, it's like watching an episode of Sober House. Literally, I feel guilty. I feel
dirty.
Small about myself when I say I'm watching this stuff. It's time to turn the page, turn it off. And here's the thing that I will say about the government, about Stephen Harper. Why won't he just tell us why he sacked her so we don't have to put up with any more of this stuff?
Listen, pundits and bloggers and columnists are all abuzz, talk about a culture war. They're buzzing about whether or not the Liberals will begin to play the politics of division, wedge politics, and start attacking Conservatives on controversial issues. I know, Scott, is that in our ear? Are we hearing the beginning of the battle cry of a culture war?
You know, when I hear Stephen Harper whine about a culture war, it's like Lindsay Lohan complaining about going out to nightclubs. Hey, buddy, this is what you do all the time. When it comes to divisive politics, labeling your opponents, smearing your opponents, Stephen Harper literally wrote the book. I mean that. They have a rule book. Remember, they have a manual. Now, let's set aside all the politics and all the strategy. I want to talk about an issue. I want to talk about a woman's right to choose. This Prime Minister has put in place a policy that says, I'm not going to defend a woman's right to choose abroad. So how then? How can we defend? How can we believe his promise? How can we believe his promise that you'll defend a woman's right at home? No, you know what? You guys want to yell culture war to deflect away from the issue. Where does he stand on a woman's right to choose? Where does he stand on a woman's right to choose? Why? That's what I want to talk about. I think that's what matters to people. Culture war. Nobody cares about whether a culture war. That's just a political artifice.
Can you imagine?
Where does he stand on this issue?
Can you imagine if a Conservative advisor said to Stephen Harper, you should go out and call the Liberals homophobes, call them, say that they're divisive, say that they're dictators, say that you should move somewhere else if you don't agree with them. There'd be hell to pay if they did that kind of thing. That's not the kind of thing that Stephen Harper's going to do, and that's not how he's going to run the next election. The way he's going to run the next election is he's going to actually appeal to hardworking Canadian families. He's going to appeal with a plan that's for the better of everybody.
It's a farce.
And he's going to win.
It's a complete farce. This culture war thing is just a deflection. The Prime Minister doesn't want to talk where he stands on socially conservative issues because he knows that women won't stand for it. All right, next topic. Gordon Brown. Britain, we got a tight three-way race. Three parties, for the first time in memory, and perhaps in the last 50 years, are at the top of the polls. Gordon Brown yesterday is on the campaign trail. I laugh. It is so tragic. He literally calls a woman a bigot, and then has to go and apologize, and then sort of rolls around in cement. It was just a horrible, ugly, awful mess. What kind of advice you got for Gordon Brown?
The only advice I'd have for Gordon Brown is this. He should start to drink heavily and not stop. I mean, I think what happened yesterday always was a mistake. It's a bit of an amateur mistake for a guy that's been in office as long as he has. But I think, Scott, there's a reason it resonated as much as it did. And that's because it played into a narrative that was written long ago, a narrative that Brown went into this race with. It's a little bit like when Kim Campbell launched her election and said we wouldn't have any progress in employment growth until the next century, or when Stéphane Dion had that difficulty in the last election with the CTV interview. Those incidents themselves weren't that damaging, but they played into a narrative that already existed. That's why it hurt so much. My advice to them, start shredding.
Well, the issue itself was pretty bad, and there are gaffes on campaigns, but It's this simple. I mean, when you got a tight three-way race, I mean, frankly, he's defying gravity by still being in this. He could still emerge as prime minister, depending upon, you know, how the last debate and the last days of the campaign go. So, you know, to have an unforced error when, you know, you got a three-way horse race, very, very dangerous. It's, you know, it's just sad to watch. I want to see Gordon Brown succeed, but boy, he's making it hard on himself.
The debate tonight it'll be interesting to watch. Another tricky situation. Speaker Milliken, the Speaker of the House of Commons this week, ruled on those Afghan detainee documents and said that Parliament had 2 weeks to work out a way for parliamentarians to see them. What lies ahead? An election, maybe?
Probably not. But, you know, let's take 1 second first of all and talk about Peter Milliken because, you know, he's a Yaroslav Halak of speakers. This guy has been served now as speaker longer than anybody else in Canadian history, and that was such a shrewd, respectful, smart, thoughtful way to bring forward that decision. We need to respect Parliament, but I'm going to give you guys time to work it out. Here's the challenge. I don't think that Stephen Harper necessarily wants to work it out, and that nobody wants an election. So I think, you know, we end up again in a deadlock where Stephen Harper sort of says, you know what, I don't like to do stuff unless somebody makes me. The Speaker can't actually make me. The opposition parties must, and I don't see much interest in forcing an election. You know, the question is whether Stephen Harper's going to do the right thing, and frankly, he rarely does unless he's made to.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. You know, a lot of Liberals are trying to paint this as a victory for them and defeat for the Prime Minister. I think the Speaker showed that he could go two ways on this, and in doing so, he split the difference. I think the Prime Minister's in a tough spot. He's got to abide by the Speaker's order, and yet he's got a sworn oath to uphold the national security, security of Canada. And so is there going to be an election? I predict not. Conservatives don't want one. The Liberals can't afford one. The only one that seems to want an election is Jack Layton of the NDP. And you know, I checked before we came on today. He has been mired at 15 to 16% since 2000. And so, like, the guy is not moving anywhere. Why he would want an election is completely beyond.
I don't want an election either, but I'll tell you something. Actually, this issue is important enough to have an election over. We've had elections in this country over a hell of a lot less.
Well,
It matters.
Rosemary, that's the time we've got for Point of Order this week. We'll be back in 7 days when I'll be right, Scott, and I think you'll still be wrong.
But I'm a Habs fan, and by the way, did you know Harper? Leafs fan. Figures.